We got an email question from Dr. Cook. The doctor says, I'd love to hear your thoughts as pharmacists on antibiotic stewardship. I see an enormous number of upper respiratory infections, almost all of them viral. When do you generally recommend antibiotics versus over-the-counter treatment?
Yeah, so he's a physician, so he's saying that he sees mostly viral. So from our end, we're not prescribers. We get the other end. We get people coming in and saying things like, hey, is there a refill on my antibiotic? I feel just the way I felt last year or 2 years ago when Dr. Cook wrote me this antibiotic prescription. So we get that end. So I would say our role more so than when do we, recommend antibiotics, so to say, just because we're pharmacists, not prescribers.
We get a free pass.
Yeah, absolutely. we kind of get to not so much give like the antibiotic stewardship speech or anything, but we kind of do tell people, well, we have to make sure that it's bacterial, not viral. How long have your symptoms gone? Do you have a fever? Those kind of things. So we will end up talking to them about that. I think it's a big thing that physicians, they get a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. I mean, constant pressure from patients. Why do you have to see me? It's the same thing as last year. Or to us, they say they just want the copay. They just want me to come in. Those kind of things. So from our end, we do end up speaking a lot about that antimicrobial stewardship type thing where resistance is an issue, those kind of things. You want to make sure it's actually bacterial. So where I usually jump in is then, I'll let you go ahead, but is what you can do for symptoms. Yeah. That's where we say, hey, this is where we can actually help besides our little spiel about, is it viral or bacterial?
So it sounds like there's a bigger question here. It's not just when do you recommend, what is the bigger question?
The bigger question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that maybe this isn't exactly where you're going, but our role seems as though, kind of like Joey alluded to, is that we're there as sort of the last line of defense, is almost like as, for education purposes. Mm-hmm. So when somebody ends up asking us about the antibiotics, it's more our job to say, hey, you may not understand all the minutia of this, but this is why your doctor may not want to write the antibiotic. This is why they're not jumping to the antiviral. This is why, they don't want to treat you, if they haven't seen you or done cultures or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's probably not your question.
Or maybe why they won't call you back for a week, because they want to see if it's 10, 14 days, not 4, 5, 6 days. That's one of the criteria.
Well, you said antibiotic resistance, and I know that's something I've seen articles about all the time. I guess one of the first questions is, an antibiotic specifically is for bacteria, not viruses?
Exactly. It only works on bacteria.
Okay, so if you have a viral infection, there's no point in having an antibiotic because it's not going to do anything.
No. Mm-hmm. All it's going to do is alter your body's existing flora, and unless you've got some underlying
something else going
therapeutic
on.
infection, then that's all it's going to do is actually be a negative.
Okay.
And we'll get into this, but globally, when that happens on large scales, then that's when you get into antibiotic resistance in general populations or in pockets of populations.
Okay, so what is that? So what is antibiotic resistance? What are we talking about?
The most simple way to put it is that bacteria learn to survive and evade antibiotics. Dante may have a more technical definition than that, but that's basically, the bacteria are learning. They learn through mutations, to survive and evade antibiotics.
Okay.
They're out there just trying to survive, and their genes mutate purely based on how can they survive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so then how it manifests is that, antibiotics that typically work stop working.
Right.
And so then you have these infections and such that are commonly treated, fairly effectively and promptly. Now they delay longer, and we can't use certain combinations of antibiotics. It leads to a whole cascade of issue.
In looking up stuff for this, I found a couple of really interesting articles talking about this very thing. This is from The Death of a Wonder Drug by Aaliyah Hardy. And and from the Telegraph, it says more and more infections such as E. coli, MRSA, and sexually transmitted diseases like gonorrhea are becoming even harder to vanquish with standard antibiotics. Antibacterial resistance is already killing almost 5 million people a year globally, and unless we manage to slow it down and find new drugs to tackle infection, health experts warn that the death toll could climb as high as 10 million by 2050. Before antibiotics, this is a really relevant question. Before antibiotics, 43% of people died of infections in this country. So meaning, I assume that means if you got an infection, you had a 43% chance of dying from it. That seems awful. Today, it is 7%. They make surgery and cancer treatment much safer. But we know that these medications are too often used for illnesses caused by viruses. That's what we were talking about, okay, which are impervious to antibiotics or for minor infections that would clear up on their own. Global antibiotic consumption rates increased by 46% from 2000 to 2018. Oh my, I didn't realize that. According to a study published by the journal Lancet. Those are pretty stark numbers.
That's surprising that late in the game, so to say, that 2000 to 2018, that there was a 46% increase. That's pretty significant.
Certainly some of that can be accounted for with more availability in places like third world countries, right? I mean, that's not strictly U.S. consumption of...
That's a good point when they say global.
Those sort of things.
Yeah, that is a very good point.
But even so...
Yeah, the greater point is that they're being used a ton.
Mm-hmm.
And not always for the wrong reasons.
And in many countries over the counter.
Yeah.
And then with the internet, now you have the ability to access the countries who allow over the counter antibiotics.
You can get them over the counter in different places. Mm-hmm. Okay, don't do that. That's a really bad idea. If it's not a bacterial infection, it's not going to help you. Okay, interesting. So how is it this is happening? You said it's the bacteria are mutating.
Yes, that's definitely one large component of it. And so the genetic factor, how genes actually mutate and then how they're transferred is probably would serve as an episode in and of itself.
Sure, yeah.
But yes, at the most basic level, that's what's occurring. So
each antibiotic works in a different way. So not to be crude, but of course it's not, this antibiotic goes in there with a big knife and stabs a bacteria. I mean, It's working in some fancy microbiological way. And for example, one of those ways is that the cell wall. So this bacteria has the ability to break down the cell wall. Or it has the ability to interfere with DNA replication so that it can't replicate and it dies off that way.
Of healthy cells.
Yes.
Okay.
So what the bacteria does is over time it realizes, hey, when this substance is attaching this protein on my cell wall, it's breaking my cell wall apart.
Oh.
Okay. And then genes start to be passed and mutated that don't allow it to attach. That's just one little crude way of describing it.
Right.
But that will say, okay, we're not going to, this protein now, we're going to change the way its surface looks so this antibiotic can't attach to it. Things like that. So each one is a specific mechanism. And I don't want to go too deep into this either, but that's why people talk about this. Is this a strong, we always get asked, is this a strong antibiotic? Is this a weak one?
Yeah.
It's really, it's the way they work is, what do they work on? Are they broad antibiotics that can work on a whole bunch of different things, or are they narrow they only work, because it can only attach to this type of cell wall or only attach to this type of DNA, that they work on very specific bacteria.
Okay.
So that's why the whole strong versus weak thing is
it's not
doesn't really apply.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, there is maybe one small thing to add to that. Just sort of reminds me, and I'm sure you'll get to this in some capacity, but the choice, choosing when a clinician has to choose the right antibiotic, narrow versus broad is such a huge part of this. Mm-hmm. So instead of, from the stewardship perspective, clinicians are trying to work towards trying to find the most narrow form of therapy for a given infection, because if you keep throwing the same broad spectrums at a multitude of different infections, then that's what sort of leads to this whole recognition and resistance pathway that occurs. So finding the specific agent makes more sense than just saying, we'll just use a Z-Pak. We'll just use clindamycin.
But that takes time. That takes appointments. That takes, who wants to do that, from a patient standpoint?
It seems like, to some extent, this is an inevitable problem that eventually, even if we're all perfect stewards of our antibiotics, 1,000 years from now, the bacteria will have mutated to the point that they can resist a Z-Pak.
Just be about the pace of it. We've accelerated the pace, but yes, you're correct.
And that's the thing. The concern is that this is happening so quickly that, if we've increased consumption by 46% in 18 years, that's a lot.
Yep.
And so if I'm remembering my high school biology correctly, any sort of evolutionary action like this, the more opportunities, the more chances for mutation, the more it's going to succeed eventually. Fascinating.
And
Go
then
ahead.
When you mentioned the, sort of like the historical perspective, there was, or maybe like the early 1900s, there was maybe like the 1900s to the 1960s or whatever it was, there was a massive increase in the development of antibiotics. Well, now that has drastically decreased. So in addition to resistance increasing, there's a decrease in the actual production and research of antibiotics.
And
so that does pose an interesting
Does that come down to
challenge.
what I'm going to guess it comes down to?
Definitely plays a role.
The bottom dollar? Okay.
Definitely, because you have to think, and that's a great point, because you have to think about if you make a medication for diabetes, that person's going to be on that medication, God willing, monthly for years, decades.
Right.
Even cancer, you're talking months and months, and you're talking about medications that are in the 5 figures of money.
Yeah.
Cholesterol drugs monthly for decades. Antibiotics, if they're good, you're taking them for 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
Then they're done. They're not big money makers. And further, they typically are derived from natural products, and so it's becoming harder and harder to find more of those natural products to derive them from.
Wow.
But overall, yes, it's money is the main thing, and it's just not as profitable overall.